friend, and welcome to the study. The earliest form of chess is believed to have originated in northwest India around the 7th century. This game of military strategy travelled along the Silk Route to Persia, where it was played prolifically throughout the centuries. When nomadic Arabic caliphates took control over the Middle East and parts of the Mediterranean, including Spain, the game went with them into Europe. There were, of course, other points of contact throughout the centuries, such as the Norsemen who swarmed down the rivers of Eastern Europe into the Mediterranean, the European embassies sent throughout the years to the Byzantine Empire before its fall to the Ottomans, the Crusaders and their estates in the Levant, and the proliferation in medieval Europe of classical literature translated from the Greek into Arabic, and of course the enterprising and far-reaching commerce of the Italian city-states, especially Venice. There is evidence that chess was being played in Western Europe by at least the 9th century, the time of Charlemagne, and that Spain, the Umayyad Caliphate, was not the only point of entry into the heart of Europe for this game. The rules and play of this early medieval chess differ somewhat from our modern game, which would begin to take shape only from about the 15th century. We look at chess in Europe before the 15th century by having a look at the earliest text we have about chess in Europe, versus de scachis, or verses about chess, and we will derive from this Latin text the pieces and strategies described, and our knowledge of literature and history, what the game of chess would have been like in the European Middle Ages, as well as a little about the lives of the people who played it. Versus de scachis, or verses of chess, was written in the 10th century, probably around 900 to 950 in northern Italy, or by some counts around 997, by a monk at the Benedictine Stiftsbibliothek Einsiedeln, an abbey that was built in 934. The text is Latin verse. There are only 2 known copies in existence today, and it comprises 98 verses, preserved in Codex 365 on 2 sides of a single sheet of parchment that was used as an end paper or paste down sheet, a rather unimportant piece of the book, until it was unstuck and pulled out by a 19th century collector. In Codex 19, these verses are written on several pages. Let's have a look at the digitized manuscript. This is considered to be the first written evidence of Western chess, and has been studied by scholars from a wide range of disciplines, including history and linguistics. The text describes scachis, its pieces, rules, and basic strategies, and is the first mention of the queen, or regina, replacing the old Arabic also describes the 64-square checkerboard, another medieval innovation. The poem begins by praising chess as a unique game, a game not requiring dice or gambling. This description was surely meant to counter any religious opposition to games of chance and gambling that the church looked rather down upon. And it is probably telling that these verses were found in the abbey at Einsiedeln. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that not only in Einsiedeln, but across Europe, chess was well known amongst the clergy. Despite being seen nominally as a game of chance or a source for gambling, it spread like wildfire throughout Europe as a beloved pastime. The poem then describes everything one needs to know in order to play this game of scachis. Then follows a description of the board and the two colors, the checkerboard arrangement of the fields on the board of 8 by 8, a pattern not yet developed by its Indian predecessor. It describes the 32 pieces, 16 on each side, that were red or white. The king, Rex, and queen, Regina. The comes, or count, equus, knight, and the rook, which was either a rocus or a marchio, and of course the pedes, the pawn. Each piece's moves are described in detail, some considerably different from our modern game of chess. The classicist Peter Hulse, writing for the classics website Antigone, writes of this poem that the author is a more than competent poet. Perhaps he had read Bede's De Arte Metrica, which offered help with the writing of the Latin verse based on the quantities of syllables, and used the elegiac couplet rather than one of the rhyming systems common in the medieval period. There are some lines where the scansion reflects post-classical practice, and sometimes the poet employs licenses that would not be allowed in the classical period of Latin poetry. For example, the last syllable of nullus in line 8 should be short, but it is allowed to stand long at the midpoint of the line, although this does not happen in any pentameter written by Ovid or other classical poets. However, despite minor technical problems, there is much spirit in the poem, which manages to find Latinate terms for much of the terminology inherited from the Arabic. Let's look at the text and reconstruct the medieval field of play. If it is right and proper to put your cares aside and play games, here is one that will refresh your mind. If you want to learn how to play it, pay attention and put your heart into it. It will become your favorite among games that you like. There's no trickery involved, or fraudulent oaths, nor do you tear apart body or limbs. You'll contract no debt, nor force anybody to pay theirs. No devious opponent will lie in wait for ruin that may come from the throw of a dice is totally absent from the simplicity of this game. First of all, the field of contest is tetragon in shape, fruitful of many squares to its own loss. Let the board be divided, starting from whichever side you like, into 8 pathways, and remember to add the same number of columns going down the board. Soon you will see 8 squares of equal dimensions, which repeated 8 times will fill the whole area of the battlefield. Some like to stain the squares with an alternating color, so the double appearance of the board may be pleasing and more useful. If only one color is used, the appearance of the board does not help you to think about the game. With 2 different colors, the plan of campaign becomes clear. And that way, the 2 armies and their kings are set in order. Each has its separate position, so that you may be clear about the number of the pieces. Let it be known that there are 2 kings, and twice 15 others. They all have different appearances and names, and move in different ways. The 2 equally divided sides don't have just one color. One side is white, the other resplendent in red. The aim of the game is the same for the 2 sides. The contest always remains equally balanced. It's sufficient to know the aims of one side. The appearance and moves of both do not differ. The warriors of the first rank hold the first line of the field already described, divided into 8. The king and queen are placed in the middle, alike in appearance but not in scope. After these come the close companions, the comes or the bishops, placed on either side so that they may be conscious of the words of their masters. Third in line come the knights on either side, ready to seize with a sideways leap their necessary target. The 2 rooks, or rather lords of the marches, travelling by chariot, hold the extreme flanks. The pieces who go first, this division occupy the second rank of squares. All look alike, and in the same fashion, these armed foot soldiers or pawns proceed against the enemy, first to suffer the wars to be waged. When each of them leaves his previous square, the square that comes next will be his host. Let a second enemy footman get in his way, he will be the first to start the battle. If another piece offers close assistance, so as to capture a piece of the other color, he who gets the first chance of striking sends savage blows in the oblique direction of his rival, except for the king. Whoever gets in the pawn's way will suffer this disaster. Whichever piece suffers this fate is not allowed to play a further part in the struggle. It is taken from the middle of the board when it falls wounded. The king alone is neither captured nor taken from the battlefield, having been struck. He joins in the fighting, but never leaves the battlefield. He always holds the premier position on the battlefield. He moves round the squares close to him. The queen's method of moving is easy to describe. Her diagonal move must always be on the same color. If her first square is white, she can never change to a square of the opposite color. When a pawn advancing against the enemy manages to reach the last rank of the board, it is generally agreed rule that, if the queen has been lost, the pawn can take on her power of the diagonal move. But I have noted that those pieces that are curved in shape, hence corvus, or comes the bishops, and occupy the squares next to their masters, reach fewer places with a transverse move. Do not seek to move them to a square different in color from the one they are already placed on. From their first square, they can move 3 squares, similar to the queen, but less in scope. Meanwhile, the knights make gyrating patterns. They take oblique and multiple steps. The third square that they land on must be a different color from the first one they spurn. As they leap from one alternate color to another, they can land on any square. But the rook always proceeds along the same straight line. His move can be as many squares as necessary to make a capture. They can reach the 4 corners of the board and cover the whole distance in one move. The battles between knights and rooks are grim affairs. If they are not on the board, it's not much of a contest, and in these contests, as in the rest of the game, watchful skill must be shown. No one should start a battle without a plan. The pieces should work together, lest an unsuspected blow lay one of them low. A solo attack easily ends in disaster. When the battle is most tense, enemy goes speedily against enemy, threatening hostile death. The king avoids this. He is never laid low. He is privileged over the rest of the pieces in this respect. When, however, an enemy cuts off his retreat, and it's the end, the whole battle is lost. That this game seems to have taken off with great eagerness in Europe is attested in the copious amount of evidence of its play, such as archaeological as well as literary, pieces, references in both secular and religious text, and in manuscript illustrations from the 10th century onwards. One piece of medieval literature, also originating in the Holy Roman Empire, is German in origin, but written in Latin, and has a large scene, or a scene in which chess plays a large part. It is the romance of Ruodlieb, written around 1030 AD. It is the first reference to chess in German literature. Some parts of the poem were were discovered in the Benedictine Abbey of Tegernsee, which was founded in 746 in Upper Bavaria in Germany. This poem was probably written by a monk, possibly one named Froment of Tegernsee Abbey, and it was translated by Baron Tassilo von Heidebrandt und der Lassa in the 19th century. Typical of romances, it describes the adventures of the knight named Ruodlieb, a youth of noble birth who goes out in the world to seek his fortune. Chess, or ludus scachorum, featured in one setting when Ruodlieb was forced to play with the court of a foreign king for stakes or a wager. This poem was only rediscovered in the 19th century, although it is now regarded as the ancestor of the German novel. It, for all we can discover, was left unfinished, and the only manuscript we have was taken out of a book binding for which it was cut up and used. The fragments were gradually discovered and pieced together in the early 19th century, and these, all in the Abbey of Tegernsee, were sent to the Munich Library, which now houses 34 leaves of this remarkable poem. At the end of a war between two kings, Ruodlieb has arranged a peace in the service of one of the powerful kings. He spends some time in the enemy's camp while he is negotiating for this peace and plays chess with the viceroy. Ruodlieb, a very clever player, wins most of his games, and he only loses when he deliberately plays to lose. After 5 days of playing chess with the viceroy, Ruodlieb is then admitted to the king's presence. Ruodlieb narrates, "The king, calling for the tabula, or chessboard, orders a chair to be placed for himself, and orders me to sit on the couch opposite to play with him. This I strongly refuse, saying it is a terrible thing for a poor man to play with a king. But when I see that I cannot withstand him, I agree to play, intending to be beaten by him. I say, what profit is it to me, a poor man, to be beaten by a king? But I fear, sir, that you will soon be angry with me, if fortune help me to win." The king laughed and answered jestingly, "There is no need, my dear man, to be afraid about that. Even if I never win, I shall not become more angry. But know clearly that I wish to play with you, for I wish to learn what unknown moves you will make." Immediately both king and I moved carefully, and as luck would have it, I won 3 times, to the great surprise of many of his nobles. He lays down a wager against me, and would not let me lay down anything against him. He gives what he had wagered, and that not one coin remained. Many follow, anxious to avenge him, proposing bets and despising my bets, sure of losing nothing, and trusting much to the uncertainty of fortune. They help one another, and do harm by helping too much. They are hindered while they consult variously. Through their disputes I win quickly 3 times, for I would not play any more. They now wished to give me what they had wagered, At first I refused, for I thought it disgraceful to enrich myself at their expense and to impoverish them. I said, I am not accustomed to win anything by play. They said, while you are with us, live as we do. When you get home again, live there as you like. We can also see many illustrations from Alfonso X's Libro del Alexandres Dados et Tablas of chess, dices and tables, or his game book. This was copied in Toledo in 1283 at the monastery of San Lorenzo del Escorial in Madrid. So, my friend, I hope you have enjoyed the sounds of medieval chess before the rules had changed to the modern game we know today. I hope you're nice and relaxed. Be good to yourself.